The April 9th, 2026 meeting of Economic Development Commission. We'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Our first order of business is to take a vote on the meeting minutes from our February meeting. Entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
I so move.
Second it.
Any discussion? Corrections? No? Okay. All in favor? All right, getting into our business, we also have with us, John, you want to just give a fast introduction of yourself for the public who may be watching?
Sure. Good evening, folks. For the record, my name is John Guskowski. I am a planning consultant with Pikey Planning and Policy Group. We are a sort of multidisciplinary planning firm based in Connecticut. My partner Mike D'Amato and I have been contracted to assist the town of Woodbridge with various planning and development matters. And so we're here to listen and contribute as we're able.
It's greatly appreciated, and thank you for making the time to join us tonight.
Of course.
Our next agenda item is something that the town is looking at, specific to looking at our zoning regulations for review and discussion of potential change and recommendations to the Board of Selectmen and Town Planning and Zoning. There was an initial meeting hosted by Town Planning and Zoning last week, and Chatty, if you'd like to give a recap on that.
Yes, give me 1 second. So I took notes, but I can barely read my notes.
I watched the meeting. You did great.
I try to listen to the right notes at the same time. It does not work well. Anyway, it was a TPZ meeting within a Board of Selectmen meeting. TPZ wants to have all of the commissions collaborate, certain commissions collaborate. CUPOP, housing, sustainability, conservation, EDC, to work towards zoning regulation changes. There is a new bill, maybe Scott knows more about this than I do. There's a new requirements coming down where by July 1st we have to have all of these regulation changes identified. So that's kind of the purpose of the meeting, and to bring everybody together and identify that, hey, we got to do this by a certain amount of time. Each commission spoke briefly, introduced themselves, and then it was kind of I think the most important part of that whole meeting to me was the discussion at the end, where people started talking about changing the regulations for certain areas. We got a chance to speak up a little bit and say we don't want to focus on, because the conversation always kind of centers around the village district, and there's only so much space in that village district. So we tried to speak up and say, hey, we need to know what the town wants to look like, what Woodbridge wants to look like in the future, before we start making all of these regulation changes and we get spotty development like we have down there now. We also encouraged everybody, we need to look at the entire area of Woodbridge, not just the business district, see if there's opportunities in other sections of the town. So in a nutshell, that was it. Really more of an introductory, start to collaborate type meeting. I don't know if there's another one planned or not.
Nothing's been passed along just yet, but I believe that was part of the conversation, was after that meeting, then the different boards and commissions are going to go back, have conversations among themselves, bring together our comments formally, and then pass those along as appropriate. Scott, you want to add anything
to the meeting?
From that meeting?
No, except Bob Shoddy was great.
What's that?
Shoddy was great. He was on the fly.
No, he
I
was
think he
terrific.
he did us proud.
He got called on a few times, and you were ready for it.
I wasn't expecting a speech in the beginning.
I know. You went. I was right next to you. I'm kicking you under the table.
EDC, like, I stumbled my way through it. Stumbled being the key word.
Well done. Thank you for going, and Scott as well. So based on the House bill, the regulations with zoning, they're looking at transit community, middle housing development, as well as mixed use development. So that, I think, is where our conversation can begin this evening. Looking at the town, and everybody should have received the map as well as the from the zoning regulations, table 1.1. which is kind of a description of each of the areas. Currently, the information provided to me from Chris Sullivan was that mixed use is allowed in the general business and then the general business overlay district. So GBA and GB on your maps.
I think just GBA, no?
Depending on how you look at it, because there is the information there about over retail. And that's what she said specific. Give me 1 second.
But I don't know that it goes all the way up to the professional buildings on Amity.
It does not.
That would be GB. So GBA is the overlay on the GB. I'm not trying to be a stickler.
No,
just-
you're right.
Just
Part
to
of
make
that.
sure,
I was
because
looking
that's
at the-
the part of the L that the
Yeah.
place
Yeah,
maybe still
I was
really
looking at
wants to
my,
densify.
The wrong note. I
Densify, is that a
apologize.
word?
It is now.
So
teacher-
there are a
school
couple,
teacher tells
there's a section in the TPZ regulations, I'll try to pull them out and send them to everybody that'll define what is and is not allowed in each one of these
Yeah.
little sections.
Yeah, they have a kind of a chart
Yeah.
as you go through.
Yep.
And it's within the first 15 pages or so. And when you're looking at the business district area, those are, the way that it's set up in the zoning regulations, it seems like, you have to look first at the residential area, so call it Upper Woodbridge, for lack of a better word, compared to the business district. So to open up that conversation, looking at the map and looking, I would think, my opinion, is number one, we should look at, and the town should look at as a whole, the potential for reducing, if you will, the number of zones within this district. The GBA and the GB, if we're thinking about mixed-use development, coming up Amity Road where you have public transportation, you have water, you have the sewer, those are areas that are prime for this type of development. Continuing into the Dev 1 along Bradley Road, and even the business and industrial, which is DeAndrea's Plaza and behind Katz's Deli and the Starbucks and things like that. So, in my mind, you've got the highway right there, and with the interchange project that's going to be started next year, that could potentially open that up and kind of release some traffic, hopefully, which I would think that could be a driver for a developer coming in and saying, this is a prime spot for mixed use. Obviously, open the conversation to everybody.
So may I add something?
Absolutely.
So I don't know how many of you were at the earlier meeting in which Planning and Zoning discussed a little bit of the implications of Public Act 25-1. But one of the requirements that is takes effect in July is that this transit-oriented middle housing, which is residential developments of 2 to 9 units, shall be allowed, basically, via summary review, which is essentially a site plan level of review, in all business and mixed-use districts. So it's to a certain extent, it kind of doesn't matter how many of the business or mixed-use districts you've got down in this area.
Okay.
All of them, if they're considered business or mixed-use zoning districts, and we get a lot of clues from the description in table 1.1. Those are all subject, or must be subject, to potential development for these middle housing things. So whether any of our municipalities like it or not, our commercial districts are basically becoming eligible to be mixed use, where you have residential and non-residential in the same zone. And so the thing that I think the Planning and Zoning Commission, or TPZ, is going to be grappling with, similar to every town in the state, is exactly how to define and regulate that type of use in the various areas. And so I think some of the guidance that this commission can help provide to TPZ as they grapple with that is, I think what other maybe design controls you would like to add in different areas, because obviously, you've got a lot of variety of zones in this relatively compact geographic area, because they're all somewhat distinct in what you see there now and what you'd like to see. And if there are areas that you believe these developments, which again are more or less going to be allowed, but with some regulatory control, if there's some nuance to those different areas and how multifamily, again, small multifamily, should fit. And then again, if there are areas like in a mixed use area, if you want to encourage bigger multifamily, because right now the state has put its thumb on the scale just when we're talking about 2 to 9 units, which is relatively small scale. This is sort of an opportunity for that discussion about what's the different capacity in each of these areas for bringing in more residential units, and dealing with them. So, to a certain extent, we have a little less control than we did about whether or not residential can happen at all in those zones. But exactly what it ought to look like and what the ultimate densities of these areas, we still have some control. And I think TPZ would like some of your guidance along those lines, if that makes sense.
So John, just a question in relation. I did watch the last meeting. I may not have picked up everything from having attended that Chatty and Scott were at. So any application that comes in those areas is obviously going to go through, but the ones that are currently not zoned for that become special exception, but they're going to go through anyway. Is that correct?
No. The point of summary review, as poorly defined as it is in the statute, is that those residential units, 2 to 9 units, are not subject to special permit. They can be subject to site plan review, which would be a full commission review, but without a public hearing and without the sort of negotiated conditional nature of a special permit. They basically need the town is allowed to draft regulations to guide that development, but it needs to be objective and non-conditional.
So John, if I hear what you're saying,
If
basically
I'm making that distinction clear.
we need to look at all these business district zones really as one, as their mixed use, but we should get in front of this and define what we want that to look like. Otherwise, it's going to be all over the place.
Yeah, and if there are areas where you absolutely don't want any residential, I think it would behoove the town, this commission's recommendations to TPZ, to seek to define them more as, frankly, industrial. Because as far as I can read the language of the statute, and a lot of this stuff is unclear and may have to get settled out in court, but industrial is maybe an area of exemption from this middle housing. But otherwise, in all commercial zones and in all zones that are determined to be mixed use, you must essentially allow them under certain regulatory standards.
So John, and it sounded like it was based on interpretation, we are allowed to define these industrial areas that will not be allowed to have these 2 to 9 transient housing type development, okay.
Yeah.
And when we look at the not the limitations, the guidelines or criteria for what can be put into the mixed-use areas, what things are we allowed to control? Are we simply not allowed to control the number of units? Or are we allowed to control what it looks
Right.
like, offset, height, height,
Yep.
grass space,
You can,
whatever?
you can control things like height and setbacks. Building design, like you could say, that every building, of middle housing needs to have, a ground floor facade with at least 50% fenestration using, natural materials of, wood, stone, and brick. You can control, roof shapes, you can control height, you can control landscaping, but all of those things need to be objective and non-discretionary and applicable broadly throughout the zone. So you can't, like, in many special permit situations, if you're putting in, I don't know, something that might be noisy, whatever, a music school or something like that, you could, planning and zoning could ordinarily say, all right, now, you know what, we need some additional buffering, let's plant some more trees or some shrubs to separate it from the neighbors. That's kind of a conditional thing. You couldn't do that on a case-by-case for these small residential developments, but you could do something like all developments will have, 12-inch, diameter breast height, ginkgo trees planted 8 foot on center across the entire frontage, because that is very specific, and you can look at a site plan and say, does this meet that criteria, yes or no? You couldn't say something like, we'll have sufficient landscaping, or will, have non-offensive lighting. Though you can't use sort of these subjective terms that leave it up to the judgment of the commission. They have to be yes or no criteria. But you can have a lot of criteria. 50% fenestration, a maximum 12-to-1 roof pitch, use of clapboard. You can say all of that stuff because those are all basically yes or no checklists, and they're non-discretionary.
And these 2 to 9 units, they can be their own standing condos or apartments. They don't have to be on top of a business, right?
That is correct. And the way I read, there's a little bit of uncertainty or lack of clarity in the statute, and among the planners and land use attorneys around the state, we've been having a little bit of a debate on this, that they refer to, mixed use, or I'm sorry, commercial, transit-oriented middle housing in commercial or mixed-use districts. And there's some interpretation that believes that commissions can allow either strictly middle housing or mixed-use development, which is to say, a building that has both housing and retail in it. And some towns believe that a town can decide, well, we'll only allow mixed use or we'll only allow small multifamily. I happen to disagree with that. I think a developer can come in and propose either small multifamily or mixed use at their discretion. But that is something that I assume Mike D'Amato and Mika are talking to the town attorney about exactly how Woodbridge is going to interpret that. But the broad point is clear that the state has put its thumb on the scale and wants municipalities to allow for more small-scale residential development in our business and mixed-use areas more easily.
Mike, John, maybe it's a good idea to and maybe we could throw something on the table so you could sort of listen. You're new to the town, to get a flavor for what we're doing. We have a number of new people in our commission that are new to the town, and we have a number of people that are long-standing people that have been in the town for decades. So, one of the things that I was want, and I didn't want to control or monopolize any conversation, but one of the things I thought is to start the conversation by thinking of economic development a little bit more broadly. And to maybe step back, and maybe just for John's benefit and not for just history, but to step back, because I think our village district, and this is my opinion, and I'd love to get other thoughts, new opinions, and I mean, new people and old people, but I sort of feel that the village district hasn't sort of quite fulfilled the promise that, or the potential that's been attached to it for years. And I think every POCD, and we're up to about 30 years now, 3 decades, we've said mixed use in the business district, and we want it. And it's never occurred, and I'm not criticizing or anything like that, but I think it's helpful to step back and say, why hasn't it? I have my thoughts about why it hasn't fulfilled it. And I think it goes to how we think about making a recommendation to TPZ as to say, we're at EDC, why hasn't it fulfilled its promise? Because it's not for lack of effort, and it's not for lack of ideas. We've got a lot of good things. Terry, you did the LOTSIP grant, and but if I look at the placemaking study, it just says do mixed use. It doesn't, it does. So why haven't we gone past that? And I'll throw out, sort of why I think that's the case. I think we've hoped by constraining any of our economic development to that area that was going to do it. That was the way, and I'll give you an anecdote on that. Last night at the Board of Selectmen meeting, if you stayed up, it was 11 o'clock at night. I could have gotten in my plane at JFK and gone to London by the time that meeting ended. But they said we can't sell coffee at the Cultural Community Center because it would compete with the business district. So it's just an anecdote, but what it means is that we've, in my opinion, looking back, is we've all had great ideas, and we've had Leslie Crean was here, John, Leslie Crean, she did Hamden, and that's why we see the T zones here, because it was form zoning. And so Leslie did Hamden, and she's out in Groton, but, Leslie did that, and we had placemaking studies 10 years ago, and we had, let's do mixed use, so let's densify the L, we did all that stuff. We did it 10 years before that. And I won't comment on why it never happened in the public meetings and stuff, but because maybe we were sitting in commissions, in my opinion, telling them what we thought, as opposed to letting them say, let it evolve naturally. Let them, that area, that neighborhood, that area. I don't live in that area. Do we have anybody that lives in that area here? And what I'm saying is we need that area to say, how do we want it to evolve? And let's not constrain it and say, we're not going to sell coffee because we're going to give you everything you need is we're not going to sell coffee. I think just the opposite. If we sell coffee up here, it'll let them evolve naturally and occur within the constraints of what the state says we have to do, and we want to give it flexibility and stuff. So I'm going to stop talking, but I'd love to throw that out to the new people in town about the idea that it all has to be there, and that's all the tool you need. So it was rehearsed.
It's interesting, Scott, because I was traveling, and I took some pictures when I was out traveling in Colorado, and there's a lot of mixed use, apartments with retail underneath. You just go to Fairfield and you see there where the Sally's built a place there, and there's apartments on top. It looks very attractive, and I think in the past people envision mixed use different than what it looks like today. A lot of the mixed use today is very attractive looking, and I took some pictures while I was out there, and I'll be happy to share some of them with you. I could see, I think as we go forward from this, we're going to need to actually travel each of these zones and look and say, where could this fit? What should this area look like? Because you don't want to also impose something in an area where it doesn't really fit, but there's some areas where it's going to fit quite nicely. We had many years ago, I know the Platypus study, Professor Platypus, he did that thing, and then you had the village district. There was a design that they're supposed to follow. I thought I haven't followed it that well, and that may be helpful to us in terms of designing what we want each of those areas to look like without becoming so restrictive that no developer is going to want to do it. And that's part of what we've got to be we want to protect what it looks like, but at the same time, we've got to encourage developers to want to do these types of projects. And, you know, to this point, we've not really, other than this one small area, we've not invited it. I mean, one of the points you made, Scott, that was, I think, through the Leslie Crane, I mean, when that was originally presented, it seemed a little bit out there, but a lot of those concepts that were presented at that time, some of those probably fit. Okay, so that's my thought on it.
We may be saying something similar.
Yeah, no doubt.
Terry, from the 2030 task force perspective, what can you bring to the conversation?
I think it's important to note that, like, we were all in favor of having mixed use, especially where it made sense, where there's retail, as opposed to, you know, by the industrial park where there's excavation going on and stuff. So, like, Bradley South doesn't make sense, but certainly, like, Selden Plaza would be a great example. Apologize, I'm sick. The problem I think that, you know, we're facing is, well, they're privately owned properties, right? So the town doesn't own Selden Plaza. It's privately owned. So we could certainly make a recommendation to TPZ to rezone to allow for mixed use, which I think would be a great thing. Let's take off some of these restrictions that we have and consolidate some of these, you know, areas. It looks like we're all in agreement on that. But ultimately, I think you still have the challenge of attracting developers to come and solicit this to the people that own, you know, because look at all the property down there. The town doesn't really own any of these commercial buildings. So how do we, you know, our kind of view was 2030, make that area more attractable to have developers come in and want to invest in that area to bring in, you know, businesses primarily, but then even down the road mixed use, which would bring more traffic to the businesses. And that's really what we were trying to envision. How do we, you know, slow down traffic? How do we make it more consumer friendly? How do we incentivize current companies to invest and make their properties look a little more appealing and uniform? I think that, you know, 55 and over was great because now we've got on Bradley Road more residents that are potentially going to be able to walk around down there, and not just on Bradley, but like to hopefully other parts, Lucy Street, Selden. So I think that we're moving in the right direction, but I don't know, just by changing the zoning, you're automatically going to get mixed use, because ultimately you've got business, you've got own, you know, people that own the property that have to buy in on it.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know if is there a history of interest in that, and that hasn't come to fruition because of whatever reason? Because the town, the owners, turned them down? Like whether it's business or mixed use? Like, do we have a demand problem? Like, do we have a problem attracting demand, or is it yes? So then, like, are we putting criteria? We're putting criteria around activity that's not happening. Do you know? Like, we need to. I think the criteria is great and it's important, but I don't know. Like,
Well,
are people coming?
I think one of the things that makes demand is the barrier that's put up that would prevent somebody from coming
Right.
into the town. So what the state has done is recognize that, and one of the biggest barriers we have is a special permit. It's a special exception, and you gotta have a 30-day period, and everybody that owns a pitchfork can come out, and they can all try to prevent it and stop that, and they have a 30-day hearing and all that on special exceptions. And so what the state's done is they said, as John was saying, is no more special exceptions on a particular segment of the market. 2 to 9, and in a business area. So that barrier's been reduced. So is there demand now? I think that barrier is down, and so the demand has been pushing it against that, and we see that in other areas of the town. We've seen the special exception, and then we've seen the lawsuits. you're gonna have to have $1 million just to get your approval and then fight whether you're gonna have it taken away. You're gonna have to invest $1 million. That's a barrier that's gonna stop that. And so we need to somehow give flexibility to that business district. And so I think the state has done that in part, and now it's up to us to make the choices about how flexible we wanna be down there. Because that barrier, I think the demand is there because the barrier's down.
So
But
that's
we can
when-
put it back up again and say, it's
Yeah.
gotta be a half a story high. And then we get,
Well,
John will
the
say that's not
criteria,
good, that
isn't
won't
it?
pass. that
So I
won't
guess
pass.
then, do we have like, is everybody clear? 'Cause I'm not, and I'll play the new card for, I don't know how much longer I can, but, like, on what are the other barriers to entry here? And like from 2030, I'm sure, and it sounds like you guys were working on addressing them by like, hey, they're addressing traffic or this and that. Like, was that assessed to help you guys come to what would we do about it kind of solutions?
To an extent, we did engage, was it Peary Associates?
Curious,
And they were doing studies on different things, traffic being one of them, aesthetics, connectivity, obviously,
People, no, like density. Yeah.
density, clearly.
Like, why did Seven Brew go in front of Walgreens then, and maybe that's an easy one, then,
They're not that here.
I mean, yeah. I'm just curious, or is it easier to go down the road than it is here? Or what would make people, we don't have a big town, right? But, so what? That is what it is to an extent, and that's changing and that's growing, and we have new housing coming, that's just come and more coming. But, so what else is it? And then how can we, I'm not trying to be oversimplify it, but like what are those barriers and
So to answer your question,
marketing?
the answer to the question is Taco Bell took their spot already. Unless they're gonna knock down, like in Wallingford, they actually knocked the building down to put the Seven Brew there, okay? They go for mostly traffic type locations.
Sure, yeah.
I don't think that's gonna be their best location, okay? It's a traffic kind of location, that type of thing. I think it's kind of be interesting, John, you may be able to give us some perspective on this. Now that the barrier is now removed, and it's not just in Woodbridge, it's everywhere. Developers who previously thought, I can't get anything done, are now going to be looking more feverishly at where the opportunities are. And I think part of our responsibility in helping this, we're going to need to do some marketing. And it was interesting, I went to a number of these networking things, through the chamber over the last month or so. And, we had no business cards, we had no brochure. And I had actually, when we missed the last meeting, I meant to bring it in here, a brochure that I used to use with Illicit. And I would go, here's our concept. This tells you all about us. We're going to need to develop something, in my opinion. Here we are, Woodbridge, this is what we can offer you. So if we go to, say, a conference, say an ICSC, International Council of Shopping Centers, and you see developers there. Interestingly, I just noticed recently, one of the larger developers that I was working with, Carpenado, they're in Rhode Island primarily, they're doing an affordable housing project in Glastonbury. I was like, wow, that's a little outside their box. I've seen them do mixed use. They have a mixed use concept that they've developed in Cranston. So I think we've removed the barrier. We've always wanted the mixed use, but we really didn't have the really easy entry into it. Now the easier entry is there. The developers are going to be out there looking for who's going to be most open to us coming. But now we got to figure out how we're going to get to those people and market to those people. I mean, I know some people, here in Connecticut that I'll begin speaking to, but we need to have something. We go, here's Woodbridge, here's what we can offer if you come here. So that's my
Have we
thought.
had anything like that in the past?
I don't
This
think
is
so.
Like, this is a selling story, right?
Yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
being proactive, like, or have we done proactive outreach to date versus, like, reactive and.
Not that I'm aware of.
And then,
No.
that would be
No.
exciting, that's,
Yeah.
and we gotta figure that one
But
out.
remember, we're constrained with having to change zoning, and if it wasn't for the state to drop one of the barriers, a special permit, and then now to give us residential mixed use, we've tried for 30 years, and if we're gonna be in a constrained area, a really compact area that's already built, there's no existing, it's not like we have 170 acres that we're ready to go, that's the waterfront that we can now build out. And, you know, we have other waterfronts, if you will, we have other large tracts of lands, we have, you know, another anecdote story, John, for you, the last time that we wanted to do mixed use. And there was a little period of time that we could have done mixed use down in the GBA, believe it or not. It closed very shortly, and that's how we have that property on Hazel Terrace that has steel on it right now. But, you know, one of the anecdote stories was about the flats, you know, because I grew up in town, and we always, you know, so that's, anyway. You know, the anecdote story was, who says we want Main Street and who says we want a village district? So that's always been a sort of a single family. If you look at this map, the business area has been constrained, and its emergence has been that we won't put a business district anywhere else. And so that's your incentive, is that you have that. So, you know, that's going to be difficult to try to figure out how you deal with that. And I would rather see not pressure on that area, but thinking broader for economic development within our town, because then that would allow that to naturally emerge, and it would decide whether it wants higher density. You know, does it want, so for instance, somebody said to me, like, I want it to look like London, Bath, England, right? I want this village, and I want it, that's 40 units an acre, okay, right? If you want Bath, England, and you want, you know, this, you know, that's 40 units an acre. And then somebody said to me, who would do such a thing? So my point is, you know, let it emerge. And I think part of the way that could emerge down there is to think more broadly about economic development and thinking about other centers for this town. That's not competing with it, because that's not going to help it. You want two car dealerships next to each other, right? So you go to buy cars. I buy a Toyota, or I buy I'm old, Datsun. So I think the same thing is true here for economic development. It actually helps, and it lets that emerge. And the last thing is, I'll say, and I'm going to sound crazy, but I always think in extremes to understand a concept and then bring it back. So let me tell you an extreme example. It's not because I believe in it or anything like that. But I could see the business district having non-conforming businesses and being a residential area. I'm going to be dead when that happens in that theoretical, crazy world, like an asteroid hitting you. But I could see it emerging in a different way. I could see it deciding that it wants non-conforming businesses. You know, and the blue check is a non-conforming use of a business in a residential zone, right? And we have the blue check, and we love the blue check, right? We all get, it's a great sandwich, right? We all did it. I went to high school, we went to the blue check. And the coin stationery there on the other corner of it. So that's a non-conforming business use in a residential area. All I'm saying is that I want to give it the flexibility of the people in the neighborhood down there, because it's already built out. Look at, I mean, an anecdote. Did you guys notice that there's, in our Dev 1, there's 2 little T3BB lots?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, you've got issues there. And we have blank slates in some other areas to do some really thoughtful stuff. And it's not gonna, by taking the constraint on that area off, I think, and giving it flexibility to emerge and create its own density and stuff, that's what my recommendation to TPZ would be, is give it the rights to go make those calls, adapt quickly. And Jeff Kennedy said to us, so go recruit somebody and bring them in. I mean, okay, but if I'm going to bring in somebody at 40, and you know, I mean, is that you know, because it doesn't make sense if it's going to be resisted. So, I'm not a planner, John, but I found it. I know you know Glastonbury very well, but I don't know if that's making any sense.
So, if I'm hearing you, you were talking. You'd be open. You suggest that TPZ be open to a fairly broad range of non-residential development, even in residential areas under certain circumstances. without sort of predetermining where that ought to
No,
be?
not necessarily predetermining where. I suggest that creating the possibility of additional economic overlay areas that we see from an EDC point of view, that I think that can have a positive impact on our village district, our flats, and it allows it to emerge in the way it wants to emerge. Because I think we've constrained and put everything down there and saying, we're not gonna do anything anywhere else. We're not gonna sell a cup of coffee, and that's gonna make you go. And I don't, and you're gonna just sell coffee, you're not gonna have housing. Well, now there's gonna be some housing. But should it be emerging there, or should it be emerging in a very thoughtful way? We have some very blank slate properties in town that could really propel us into the century that we're all gone. But we have a chance to do that rather than, and so I think we're putting a lot of force and pressure on a very compact area. It's 10 acres. And you say, well, no, it's much bigger. It's not. It's 10 acres because you take the roads out. You take the south side of the BI district out on, we own 10 acres in the BI, it's 20 acres. The car dealership's 10, and then the other 10's on the south side of the Merritt, up by the DOT spot. So we really don't have any size, and I think Dev 2 is bounded by physical barriers with only very limited ways to get out to it. So, I mean, that concerns me, and that also concerns me for when we get into the sort of the civil rights portion of the housing bill, which we haven't even discussed, and maybe that's not on the agenda tonight, the fair share portion. But does that explain what I'm trying to say a little bit better? It's not that everywhere in the residential A, but it's in the areas that we think could have villages and neighborhoods created for economic development that would actually lift some of the pressure that's on that business area and let it emerge naturally.
So to date, have we put that pressure on? Has there been intentional limits on developing elsewhere, and has there been interest in developing?
I'll let somebody else answer that. I mean, I think we know, we can all jump up and down and say yes.
I think,
Yeah.
I'll give you my perspective. Yes, there's a lot of pushback in town to develop anywhere.
Anywhere else, yes.
And that includes housing.
Like including like a coffee shop by the library or something like
Yes.
that? Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Which is why the coffee truck was the only thing able to show
Yes.
up there every now and then.
yes.
But when you're looking at, as an example, the country club, specific where the clubhouse was, and all that area already has the infrastructure there, right? You have water and so on. That's an area I think that most people, maybe not, would be favorable to seeing something go in there that could potentially be mixed use or whatever. Not just leave it as an eyesore that it is.
If I could just piggyback on, and I'm really probably talking too much, so raise your hands, kick me under the table like my wife does.
I'll line up.
Yeah. I think that is an area. I kind of lost my train of thought right now, but I think that is an area of the country club that we do need to consider.
And again, I would imagine that, I guess you can't say most, but there would be a fair share of the town that would be agreeable to that.
There's definitely a contingent.
I think some of the lesson that's been learned here from what the state has now done here is we kind of sat back and we weren't flexible enough, and not us, all the towns weren't flexible enough. And now it's thrust on us. I think phase one, of our responsibility is to figure out in the current business district what we want that to look like. We got to get that, I think, buttoned down as to where we're going to be with that. I don't disagree with what you're saying, Scott, in terms of some of the other ideas that are out there. I don't think I would couple them right on top of doing that in this moment. I don't think the town's ready for that. And as much as I can conceptualize some of what you're saying, I wouldn't lead with that because of and I think it's obvious, we all know what the discussions are. I mean, just when we get into the country club discussion and, getting, 51% of the population to agree to any one idea over there, and that's why it's sat the way it's sat, and it's,
Still sitting.
So-
But is there, to play devil's advocate on that, and I do not pretend to know what is going on in all of the conversations, because there are many conversations, I understand. But where that conversation is now is different than maybe it was a year ago.
I agree.
So
I agree.
people maybe have an understanding that something's gotta give, we can no longer do nothing, so something has to happen. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe the time is now to be proactive and make some suggestions about it.
I was just
Before
making- I was just making the comment-
suggestions get made
Yeah.
for us.
yeah, I mean, I'm just making the comment because in the past, we haven't been able to get 51% of the, maybe,
You're right.
maybe you're right, maybe,
Right.
though,
I never
there
thought
is a
about it that
change.
way. That's a good point.
I agree with Shona, and I think that is happening. People are realizing that 830G is breathing down our
Yeah.
neck, and if
Yep.
we don't do something, so Bob, I disagree with you a little bit, but I don't know how we're gonna do the opposite of what you were saying. We have to move quickly. We have to look at, I think, everything, because if we don't, 830G stuff is gonna start coming into
Yeah.
town, and we have nothing to fight against it.
All I was saying is that the priority, we need to first tighten this one up,
I-
and then,
yes, yes.
I don't know how quickly
Yeah.
the other ideas come, but I don't think I would work on the other idea before I worked on this one, that's where my point.
I don't disagree with that. We do need to focus on, I think, on the business district, but we can't wait on the other stuff, if that makes any sense. Because Shona, we're going to have a problem. We are seeing, let me rephrase that. It feels like there's a shift in town in terms of people understanding that if we don't do anything, and there's still a contingent that doesn't want to do anything. If we don't do anything, 830Gs are going to show up, and they're going to show up where we don't want them to show up, and we're not going to be able to do anything about it. Now, is it going to be terrible? Maybe, maybe not. It is people coming into town. People coming into town will drive the need for other things, businesses, jobs, whatever. So I'm not saying 830G is all bad, but I also don't want a gigantic facility across from the
Right,
beach.
we can give some guidance on
Right,
where
right.
and how
Yeah.
it happens. We want it to happen, maybe, like, hopefully, but, instead of it happening to us, can we
gotta
proactively
try.
plan
Right.
for it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Shona, I remembered my thought now, my senior moment is over.
Yeah, okay.
But my senior moment has a plus tied to it, because I remember when the flats was flat, and I remember when there was nothing there. And, because I go back into the 1960s in town. And I think one of the things, and I may be wrong, but I think we see that as an example, and the planner can probably back me up, that says, yeah, I've seen that in other areas, that there's this struggle, and if we don't address it in a holistic planning sort of a way, we end up putting things and shooting ourselves in the foot. We end up having, I use the, right on the best beachfront property, we have the 7-Eleven and the towel store and the, right on the beach, as opposed to, it could have been, those great businesses could have been put in a better thing if we had planned, but everybody was pushing to resist it. And I think that's how the flats got built out. We can't do housing, so let's do a nursing home. We can't do housing, so let's do a 55 plus, because there was, people came to try to put in housing that wasn't active communities, that wasn't an exception to fair housing. Because 55 plus is an exception to fair housing, right? Because it discriminates based on familial status potentially, right? But it's an exception. So we've intentionally created in a resistance kind of an approach, and that's why the flats is built out the way it is, amongst just single-family homes, and then age-restricted stuff, office buildings, those kinds of things. Office buildings don't produce residential people, and no residential mixed use. So that example is in front of us when we do tackle other areas, and if we start to make those same mistakes, then we're just going to be, this year we're going to put it in assisted living, this year we're going to put a 55 plus, and we're going to end up with the same disaster. Had we had the flats right now to start over again, and with the assistance from some of the people that are helping us, whether it be the state or some of the other people that are trying to help us in town, do economic development essentially through education, I think we can make some really great strides that we won't we'll be happy with if we make them. Because we won't be happy if we start fighting and getting things we don't want, and that maybe goes to your 830G, but that may be a little bit different there on the 830G. That may be more towards the affordable housing and the sort of the aspect of doing your fair share, you know, for as a society. But so anyway, that's, you know, so I kind of think we got to do it, because otherwise we're going to end up in another disaster.
John is, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, can we bring it back to like the here and now and what is happening in July? Is there a timing, like, are there timing considerations for when some of these decisions or suggestions, recommendations need to be made?
Yes, July 1st, and correct me if I get this wrong, July 1st is when we have to have recommendations for zoning changes
Right.
for the business district.
But that, from my understanding, and this is hearsay, is that is when it is due or to be submitted, which means that we would need to have something done 30 days before, reviewed by someone,
But
which
yeah,
kind of
by the way, I
backs us
should
out
tell
into
you,
now.
John is the chair of the Housing Council that's in charge of H 2501, so we do have the expert that can answer the questions.
I'm just trying to back
Well,
up, because
yes.
July, if things need to happen to
Yeah.
back from
Yeah,
July,
right.
it's April.
It's
you know?
there, yes.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, your regulations controlling potential, you know, middle housing proposals would be in place for July 1. That's because July 1 is when that portion of the statute becomes effective. That is when, you know, municipalities must allow these things by summary review. If Woodbridge or any other municipality doesn't have those regulations active as of July 1, it's not the end of the world. It just means that you lose a little bit of regulatory control should some developer be ready to go with their proposal on July 1 and slap down their application on the land use counter, right? You know, it's pretty unlikely that any developer would have a property lined up and a design ready to go for that time. But yeah, it would behoove the town to have the regulations in place as, you know, soon after July 1 as possible, if not before. But again, yeah, if you don't have a regulation in place, then the statutes take over your regulations.
Shorty and Scott, I mean, you attended me, I listened to the meeting. I mean, I heard in that meeting, you guys have regulations. If you do nothing, you have regulations. But it's probably in your best interest if you're gonna make some modification to do it before July 1st. That's what I heard in that meeting, and
That's
let's,
what John just said.
yeah.
But John, if let's say we're
So it's
2.5
not as
stories
panic, it's-
down there right now, and we do nothing, and so we have our zoning from the state right now. We don't change our bulk requirements, our setbacks, or anything like that. What's the height that could go in there by summary review? Would it be just the existing height, or
Yes.
so
Right. You would have a maximum height across that zone.
of 2.5 stories?
Right. So that's what it would comply with. And the standard setbacks would apply, lot coverage. Some of the things that would not apply is if you had certain parking regulations, because that's the other element of 25-1 that's effective in July, about mandatory off-street parking for small middle housing, small multifamily housing. But yeah, the other standards within that regulation, bulk and loading, and I suppose if you had any design or fenestration or some of that stuff in place, that would apply also. But you know, the only thing that you could not say is middle housing is not allowed. You know, that would be overridden.
So my concern with that is we have pretty restrictive, you know, there's not going to be a developer that says, well, I'm bringing in 400 units. You know, that's not happening, right? So, I mean, without a fight but you know, and that kind of thing. So you know, I'm thinking it's an awful lot of pressure when we go towards the other things that we need to accomplish under the housing bill. It's an awful lot of pressure to put that in that compact area. That's a lot of pressure, and I don't know that that's going to emerge the right way for everything. And so I kind of think we got to think about those other neighborhoods and economic drivers of housing in other areas to take the pressure off that, so that can emerge in the right way given its constraints. a way of saying, I think we gotta look at some of these other areas quickly, and
Nothing,
what's-
nothing stops us, I'm sorry, Bob, nothing stops us from making housing zoning regulation requests to TPZ outside of the business district. We're focusing on the business district here, but to Scott's point, maybe by July 1st, we're not telling them do something in the business district, we're telling them open up your residential regulations in, pick a spot that's yellow on this map. And then that, like you said, frees up the business area to do businessy stuff.
to emerge.
Yeah.
To emerge and without the constraint of having the responsibility, that's our business district.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I'm thinking outside the box here a little bit, if we make no changes to the regulations and it's 2.5 stories right now, and we're trying to get mixed use, well, maybe that needs to be 3. Because how are you gonna get a developer to build residential when he wants 2 floors above the retail, okay? That's just a logical thought process of what could happen here. So that may be one where we may say, well, and what's that look like? I mean, we'd have to kind of look at the scale of what does it look like, and is that something that, okay, that would work in this area, in that area, and not so much in this one over here.
Is 2.5 stories, would that be considered one residential story and one commercial, one commercial story and one, which is a little bit
I
taller?
would think,
and then one-
John, but I would
residential on top of
think that half is the colonial look.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's the
Yeah.
additional.
Yeah.
Under the eaves.
yeah, yeah, you're not getting a.
It's the
Yeah.
it's make it, and some might say it's to make it more expensive. But
Isn't that sort of like 245, Bradley? Isn't that where like saloons is and that's
Yep.
the strip? That's 2.5 stories.
That's
Right.
correct.
And that's a nice look.
Yeah.
that developer sort of complied with the design guidelines that were sort of, I mean, that's one of the, probably the guy that complied with
Completely.
the idea of the design guidelines that is being considered by TPZ. You know, we had the Architectural Review Board, but, you know, we didn't necessarily see that get enforced in some of those areas. But that developer did meet those.
He did well.
Did those guidelines, good or bad, but he met them.
I look at an example in Orange, where it was the Firelight
Firelight.
Yeah.
Shopping Center. So they, in the back where it was just commercial, they had some restaurants, stores, and whatever else. That was all demolished, and I want to say that that's 3
I think
stories.
it's 3.
And they've got a gym in there, they've got a restaurant in there, they've got a yogurt or whatever it is.
Is that right behind the dip top?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the other side. It looks tasteful, and something like that I can see as in one spot, for instance, within that DeAndrea's Plaza.
Yeah.
Why? You got the highway there. I had a conversation with someone just last week that lives in Shelton. They work for Sikorsky. Shelton's Fairfield County, so the price for the apartment is a little bit higher. But he said, we would move to an Orange or Milford down that way. Just getting over that Sikorsky Bridge brings the cost down, you know, for your living. And if you can find something like that, if you go out 95, looking along in Guilford, they're doing it. Further out, Madison is doing some affordable, some otherwise. But and to my question to you, John, is when you're looking at the constraints that are put in place, can you say anything specific to affordability with either these 2 to 9 units or even larger, and be specific
you
on
can.
what you have to do?
Yeah, I think you can. And I think, you know, at some point, you know, some municipality is going to decide to load up these summary review regulations to be so unrealistic that no developer would ever do that, and they're probably going to get challenged. So you could, you know, you could say that, you know, the building has to be clad in titanium or something like that, you know, something objective but completely unrealistic. But in terms of your specific suggestion, yeah, could you require, you know, 20%, you know, 25% of the units be deed restricted in some way, you know, to be affordable to 80% of the area median income? Yeah, I think that's completely reasonable. And in keeping with the desire to encourage more affordable housing, in keeping with the, multiple unit housing and, mixed income, it certainly would change the pro forma or, the capital stack, calculations for a developer because some of their market rate units are now going to need to be affordable. But yeah, I think that is completely consistent with the idea of a summary review.
So let me ask a curious question with that. Could there be an incentive? Oh, it's 2.5 stories, but if it's 25% affordable, you can go 3.
Yeah, sure.
No, I'm looking at the Firelight Commons website now. It's three, and I like the look.
Yeah, it looks nice.
What's the name of the?
John,
Firelight Commons.
is it, some of the conventional wisdom that I've heard is that it's really going to be difficult and sort of counterproductive to try to require the set aside. That's, inclusionary zoning is when you say you're going to build, but you have to set aside a certain percentage, right, of your housing for
Right.
affordable. And so I've sort of heard that 2 to 9, any affordability requirements there, you should probably start them at 10 and above. And a lot of towns have done that. No, they say, if you're going to set up an IZ, it's going to be 10 and above because 2 to 9's not, you're probably not going to get it. And so I'd love to see how you react to that because if we say, well, we're going to go into, we're thinking of our affordability hat now and thinking of our fair share and we're thinking of a compact area. And now we're thinking, we want to make sure that if we put multifamily in, that it has a set aside, and we want to see it built, then we're going to be talking a lot higher densities than 2 to 9 because 2 to 9 can be tough. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I don't think there's any magic to 10 units or above or whatever. I think it depends entirely on your market. If like for example, out in the middle of nowhere, relatively speaking, stores, Mansfield, Connecticut, they have an insane demand for student housing and related multifamily housing. They keep ratcheting up their affordability percentage. They started at 10, they went to 12, 15, 20, and developers keep coming because they want to build there. Like there's that market, and I assume in places like Milford, Fairfield, Stratford, Stamford, they can, you could have a 50% set aside, and you still might get some developers doing it. So I think it really depends on your market. I don't think there's any magic to 10 units and above, but it's a nice round number that helps towns, draw a line somewhere.
So John.
But not only could you, if you were doing 8 units and you required 2 of them to be affordable, and the other variable is at what level and to what duration.
Yeah.
A 40% deed restriction at 60% area median is a lot harder a pill to swallow for a developer than 20% of the units at 80% median for 10 years. It's about turning these dials in a way that recognizes your market and the constraints of developers. And so that's something that you could, if you haven't, and talk to some small multifamily developers in the area about what things could be tolerated for Woodbridge's market and which things would be out of bounds. That would be very helpful. And it's also, these things aren't, carved in stone. You could start at, 10% affordable for 20 years at 80% AMI and see what happens. And if you get a bunch of those, maybe you ratchet it up and ask for a little bit more.
We're drifting off. We're not drifting, but we're moving off into sort of the other segment that's off the agenda into thinking about how we hit the fair share number. Mm-hmm. And a couple of things that were raised in the council the other day and at the working group for OPM, and there are 2 concerns I have for this town is when we start to think about if we start to not think about what the ultimate number probably is going to be from a point of view, if we don't start start there and understand what that number is for our fair share, and we start to think about how we don't accept a number before we even hear the number. Like, does anybody know what the number was before 2501 came in? And what I'm saying is we need to think about that, because that is important for where we plan. If we just don't think of that as the long-range goal, then we may be doing things, again, shooting ourselves in the foot. So before the new law came in, our number was 332 deed-restricted units, and for the town of Woodbridge. So where do you build 332 deed-restricted units? Do you load them up on the 10 acres in the business district, in the flats? So, but if you say, well, we're not going to get to 332, that's fine, and you may be making decisions saying we're not ever going to do 332. But if it's 332, what I'm saying is, so one of the concerns was raised is you need to think about this holistically as you go in. It's not a fun conversation in this town especially, but I think it's for our responsibility as EDC and planners and trying to do economic development to keep that in mind if we're talking about set-asides. And the other thing that was raised is isolating the fair share housing, in other words, affordable units, and isolating that into maybe potentially not mixed income communities, all affordable housing, 100%, and putting it in a particular area. I was very concerned about hearing a suggestion that in Dev 2, which has a mountain, a highway, and a pond, with a river in front of it and only 2 single lanes to get out, and that would be a great place for our set-asides and multifamily housing. I had concerns that is that spot that you don't have access to the rest of our community. I was very concerned about that from the fair housing kind of way that we have to look at that. So those are my 2 concerns, is if we don't address that, we're gonna start making decisions somewhere that so I think we're better off to think about that holistically.
So Scott, isn't it true that 332 doesn't necessarily have to be built units, it could be conversion of existing units?
It just means there has to be a unit, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but there has to be a unit that's deed restricted.
Right.
Yes, to answer your question.
John, I want to go
yes.
back and ask a question that you were talking about Mansfield for a second, because I think some of the examples of, there may be some towns that have done a good job that we should go look at. Who's making up who's filling in these units in Mansfield? Where are they coming from? Are they UConn students or the UConn staff? Where are they coming from?
It's a mix, but a lot of it is student housing, and it's because the school has expanded so rapidly. So you do have these wealthier parents that rent the thing out for 3 years and jam a bunch of students in it. My sense is it's largely student housing, and I don't use Mansfield as an example of how to do it. I'm just I'm use that as an example of supply and demand. Understanding the demand market.
So should we
The
look
one
at?
correction I would note from something that was just said is the housing growth plans, which is obviously modeled somewhat on fair share plans, doesn't require the town to build anything or actually issue any building permits. It is just about developing the plan that would, again, in a perfect world, in a ideal market condition, would enable that development, would enable the development of that, X hundred number of units. It's about removal of barriers and making investments to enable, rather than at the end of the 5 or 10 year period, being able to go to OPM and say, here are all the building permits that we issued, all the certificate of occupancies we've issued. It's about the plan and the good faith efforts.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Thanks for that correction. I have heard that if you plan for it, they'll build it. So I think there's a little bit of both of that if you do make that plan and you do reduce those barriers, you have a pretty good chance of creating it. So maybe I skipped that step. I didn't mean to imply that having a plan to do it would mean it would get done. But it oftentimes results in that if there's not things put in there in those plans.
So our next step for us with regards to any type of recommendation, John, would you advise that we put our heads together and come up with some of these specific, for instance, we talked about height, and we talked about things like that. Do we get that specific and offer Economic Development Commission's recommendation to Board of Selectmen and ultimately to TPZ? I think that was explained to me that it would work, like it would flow that way.
Yeah, I know. I think, again, I'm not familiar deeply with the Woodbridge sort of inter commission communication stream. Ultimately, it's the Planning and Zoning Commission or the TPZ that's going to adopt these regs. So, I don't know if it's a breach of protocol to go directly to them and not go first to the Board of Selectmen. They are going to pass a regulation, which means they're going to have a public hearing, which means they are open to all suggestions. And so if you guys have specific suggestions, I don't see all things being equal, a reason not to go directly to them with your thoughts. And yeah, I think areas in which they could use your help would be things like, let's stick with the 35-foot height, but if people are going to provide, if developers are going to provide, a higher degree of affordability, let them go a little higher, provide a little incentive on that. Like things that you could suggest to put a thumb on the scale to make development a little more attractive. And again, maybe in those certain areas, and maybe you do want to avoid, creating a single, giant multifamily with just low-income people. That's an important thing for PPZ to hear. That you want to spread this out across multiple buildings, across multiple zones, across multiple developments. And yeah, if you think there are areas that are more suitable for a little higher density, you don't need to stop your thinking at 9 units, right? Those are the kinds of suggestions that I think would be useful to TPZ.
I don't think we overcomplicate it. I think the expectation is us to deliver a piece of paper, or a number of papers, that has EDC on the top, our names underneath it, and says, here are the recommendations for TPZ from EDC. And hand it to them. That's it.
Yeah.
John, could I ask a question on tools? And I don't know what commission it falls under, whether it would, it would require an ordinance. But I believe it's Connecticut General Statute 1265B allows you to freeze an assessment, right? And that, I think, I could be wrong, but that's why I'm asking. Did that get expanded such that what a town can do is it can pass an ordinance, and under the law, it was really blown wide open at the end of 2024, I thought, that you could actually freeze. So like, for instance, if somebody, crazy example now, you got a piece of land and it's $100,000, you could freeze that assessment for up to 30 years. You wouldn't do it, that's a crazy example, but to tell you the magnitude of this thing, and it might have an equal protection argument, but you could freeze the assessment on that and say, okay, the town's entered into an agreement for 30 years, you're gonna be taxed at $100,000 of value on assessment, and you're gonna put in a $50 million mixed-use development. Obviously, for 30 years, we wouldn't get any taxes. On year 31, though, we're gonna charge, that's for darn sure. But my point is, anything short of that, I think in the old days, John, right, they used to be very short, right? Short-lived, and I know towns have those sort of freezes. Is that something that we should be thinking about from an EDC point of view in conjunction with, that goes with a plan that, you add those kinds of things in, and now it actually does create the housing. It's not just a plan that we don't have to build it. We are, we're deciding that we want to see it built.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure about the extent to which the legislature expanded the horizon for municipalities on this stuff, but it's very standard for municipalities to offer a 7 to 10 year tax abatement of some type, where you ramp up, say, call it a 5-year tax abatement, and the first year you pay no taxes, the second year you pay 20%, third year you pay 40%, etc. That sort of helps the developer on the beginning end to fund their capital stack. That's a fairly common thing, and then you'd have to enable that by statute. But that adds incentive upon incentive to and at the beginning of the meeting, you guys were talking about marketing materials. If you were to adopt something like that, that would be an ideal, blurb on a 2-page or a trifold brochure about, about Woodbridge, about developing in Woodbridge. You talk about your median income and your high level of education and your, sophisticated populace and your high earning power and your location in New Haven. And then also, by the way, hey, we also have this tax abatement, and also we have these areas of developability. Come take a look, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Dale Croup came in, it was maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, if you remember, but I believe that was before the statute had been busted wide open. So I think Dale came in and he didn't, and we had it on our agenda to sort of think about those things. But I think Dale's comment, and I'm not going to say, but he had said that, they were pretty adopted limited wise, 1 year, 3-year freeze, 5-year freeze, those kinds of things. And so it's just the net incremental improvement that you do on the property. So, if you have a $100,000 property, you put a $20,000 improvement for a 3-year freeze on it, it's not that big a deal. But I think they've opened that up, subject to if you have the guts to do it, because somebody might say you're violating equal protection and all sorts of crazy arguments. But if you have a real thing, that may be something that if we really want to do it, that we might want to make a recommendation to really look hard at making this, making long-range decisions to make it happen.
Right, and just procedurally, that would probably be a recommendation more directed towards the selectmen rather than TPZ, because TPZ really shouldn't be getting into dollars and cents.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fiscal zoning.
So what's our action steps from here?
I think what we should do from here is either we can have a special meeting where we can leave here tonight and brainstorm things out ourselves, come back in, let's say, 2 weeks' time, just throwing that out there, and come up with our plan and say, here's our piece of paper or 2 pieces of paper, here's the town planning and zoning, this is our recommendation from EDC, and then let them go from there. Then we can start tackling some of this other important stuff that's on our.
I think we need to see what the zoning requirements in each of these current areas are and what the architectural requirements are, so we can discuss. I mean, I'm happy if I have that, I'd be happy to drive through the different areas and come back and say, hey, this is what I think. I'm sure the rest of us can do the same thing and say, well, what we're going to have to kind of, similar to the way Hoopop's gone through all their properties. We almost have to go through each one of these. Well, what do we think of this zone? Okay, what do we think? It currently says it's this. How flexible should we be? And I think each of us will need to travel through these zones to visualize what those zones look like, so we're not just doing it in a vacuum.
Looking at that, the placemaking study, and it was on 2030, but it's on the town website, from Puri, has some design options that are there, kind of giving you that, quote unquote downtown feel, like you're driving one stretch, so you have mixed use along Amity Road, for instance, which can go all the way up to 270, which is those professional buildings. We look at, I drive by every day, the McGill's, which was the former trailer depot or whatever it was called, and it just,
Looks like shit.
it is what it is, but it's a lot at this point. But somewhere like that, this is what you want to see. You want to be able to drive into Woodbridge and have your gateway be something that's appealing to another developer, not coming in and, years ago that was a car sales place, and I think they fixed cars there. There were 2 or 3 garages along that stretch. One is now the vacant lot next to M&T Bank. That was another auto body shop. So that's what that was. And at what point do we say, okay, now we want to steer this ship, taking your point, Scott, about the folks that live down there and what they want to see. I'm sure they would prefer to see some type of a mixed use with something that they can walk into and buy a sandwich rather than another used car lot or a junkyard.
That's what I would want. I would like to drive down there, park my car,
Park the car, walk around.
go to
do
the
some
shop,
things, yeah.
go get some groceries, go get some something to eat.
Get some something to eat, yeah.
A municipal lot could be something that you could use the abatement for, the freeze for.
The what?
A municipal lot could be free, you could use the freeze on that because that really complements.
So,
I like the idea of like having a special like focused conversation on what our recommendations would be. Can we go over like if we're gonna go home and do some homework? Can we go over what the components of our recommendations should include? So that we can all like,
can I add it to that first?
oh, yeah.
First thing, business district. Take a look at the zones that exist now. Understand what the requirements of each zone are, and then determine what changes we would recommend in the requirements and in the zones. So do we get rid of some zones? Do we make more zones? I'm not saying that's the idea, but you get the picture.
Yeah.
So that's it for the business district. But then we expand to the rest of Woodbridge.
Yeah.
And say, these are, which, the rest of Woodbridge is essentially A, except for some spatterings of Ts, which are
Yeah.
green. And then from there, we determine, hey, we'd like to see some zoning changes in these areas where we don't see any roads and houses on this map. If it's even possible, I don't know what those areas are, so. That's my take on what we would do for this before the special meeting. One other thing is, we talked about incentives as we're going through and thinking about these things individually, maybe jotting down some incentives that we think could be used, no matter how crazy they are. You know, maybe we have a list over here that's all incentives that we consider, because like you said earlier, we are now competing with other towns once July 1st hits. And given the current climate in Woodbridge and the space we have now, I'm not so sure Woodbridge is that competitive commercially, if I use the right word, to build new stuff and bring in new people. So we gotta get us there.
And then is a separate item these criteria that we talked about, or where does that fall under the same recommendation? Like,
That'd be the requirements part
Yeah.
of the zoning.
okay.
And in our regulations is where those things currently exist. And the zoning regulation was sent out, so it's in there somewhere. We can go in and pull it out for the sake of our team here, or you can go in and read however number of pages are in that
Yeah.
zoning regulation. So,
You know, one of the things that, I think we can do that, but I'm really concerned about the perspective that we bring that may not be the perspective of the neighborhood in the village district in the flats. So I think we can bring our own perspective, but I also think what Cliff said is really important, because I had heard something 10 years ago when there was discussion about doing mixed use down there. And I think I have it right, but you may even have, you know, and so this idea, you're gonna hear different opinions, like, well, we need to make it all commercial because we're gonna eat up our commercial space. Or you're gonna, and that was a comment that I think has been made by a number of people that own some of the large properties that we would be essentially promoting as in the L there, to go after and saying, that's the zoning, that's where we want it. I worry about we want it there. So I think we really need that overlay, is that's a possibility, but at the same time it may not be, you know, the resistance and everything, it may not be the best for its compact, so.
that's correct. But remember, we're gonna make recommendations, they're gonna bubble up, and
Yeah.
then it's going to go to the town.
Yeah.
Fair
And
enough.
that's when the town, we will need to encourage the town to speak up. And the folks down in the business area, there was gonna be a development of, I forgot how many two-family units, like 14 two-family units down there. And they came in droves. They were not happy to put in.
Did you see that's on Inland's Wetlands? It just went up.
Is it?
Yeah, it just went up on,
So-
all
so
those duplexes
they-
on Merritt just went up on the IWC meeting.
Our residents down there, they're not happy. They weren't happy with that. They don't want more congestion at all, because it's already terrible down there. They can't get out of their roads. They, you know, reciting what they told TPZ, I was at TPZ at the time. So, yeah, we're gonna have to make recommendations, unless we go out and survey them now. We're gonna have to make recommendations based on what we think is best for economic development of the town, and then allow other input to manipulate those or change those so it satisfies and works with our residents down in that area.
So to deal with, one of the comments you just made about the congestion, one of the proposals that was made with the reconfiguration with the merit and the state was that there was a proposal that there would actually be a connecting road literally in front of Katz's, connecting Amity Road to make it easier to travel through that area, which that would probably be helpful in terms of everything that we're talking about here to make the flow there work better, because if you're just going to add people to that area, but they can't get out and they can't get in, it's a problem. And actually that free flow, if that happened, and when I originally saw that, I said, wow, that's brainchild. I don't know where that stands, if that's ever going to happen. We got an expanded lane, get on the Merritt, that's all we got. So.
Terry, did you get a sense from any of, because I wasn't, you're the one that could really help us. Did you get a good sense in the 2030, or was it still sort of in the discussion phase about, yes, we want mixed use, but when you get down into the, well, do you want mixed use at, that high densities with set-asides and things, did you get a sense of where that was leaning or something?
It was just one of the many things that we talked about, and again, we were very broad with our recommendations. We held definitely 2, possibly 3, I went to 2, but possibly 3 community events at NEBCO and Crest, and we invited businesses and residents to come and share their input about everything, about what they wanted to see. Some people wanted to see bookstores, restaurants, more streets. They wanted to see if there was a possible way to put more sidewalks in. And there's a lot of information that we collected from those community meetings. So I'd say maybe we can take a look at those, because it was pretty helpful.
Are there recommendations, sorry if I should have read them, but are they available somewhere that we can access?
They should be on, I feel like they should be on the website. Okay.
It was on the 2030 page, but then when it was dissolved, we moved the placemaking, and the other, from the PRE report.
Okay,
And the
that's where it would
FOR
be.
report, infrastructure are both on the EDC page.
Do we want to query the calendar or what date would be good for a special meeting? 'Cause we have to announce that. For the
Yeah, we have to.
We do.
I should probably check
Yeah.
availability. So if it's a working meeting, we could probably use the smaller room, if need be. Okay, so I think I could go whole for this month, right?
This month.
Let me go for this schedule.
The 23rd or 30th.
23rd, I'm looking maybe the 23rd.
Is this something we want to do during the week or a weekend? Does it matter to people?
I prefer
Week.
weeknight. I prefer weeknight.
I agree.
I'm always wide open, so whenever you schedule.
I had a life of
Weekend,
retired.
then we
The
can
life
do
of being
that.
retired.
Yeah. I'm on vacation
weeknight.
next week. I can do it anytime next week.
Is next week school break?
School break next week.
Yeah, 13, 17. John, as we're starting to set up a special meeting, and as we start to think when we go home, do you think it makes sense to sort of think in the broader context of sort of the ultimate numbers, or do you think we just sort of, your thoughts about just keeping it compact with within the village district, the Flats area, because that was our agenda item, or do you think it does make good sense to sort of think about this in the broader context of how we plan to get to the ultimate numbers, the ultimate goals?
You mean ultimate goals of affordable housing?
Yeah, I mean, the whole housing creation, because that's sort of a component that overlays on top of just making zoning changes in the village district, because housing is economic development, but it's also you know, it's gonna really impact what we should do down there as well.
But we also wanted to look at the rest of the town, right?
That's
So
what I'm saying
where it
is,
comes in.
I was asking
Yeah.
John if he says, yeah, you gotta sort of look at that, because if you load it all up, you know, then, you know, it's gonna be a different assignment for us to say, did we lose you, John?
No, I'm here. I maybe just lost you the part that ended in a question mark.
The question was, what do you think as we go home to think before we come to a next special meeting? We're thinking about the
Yeah.
zoning changes that we would recommend in the village district. But do we have to keep our eye on the ball about the sort of the overall planning number that may be a little bit more tangential to this this group, EDC, but still
Yeah.
important, because if we don't keep that in mind, we may be making recommendations that really we should have kept that in mind about, you know, what kind of housing we're gonna have to meet as a town, as opposed to, you know, just putting it in a particular area.
Yeah, I would tend to, well, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily focus on either, you know, because the new law is a new law, right? And there's the July 1 stuff, the middle housing is a requirement, so you gotta do that. So I think, you know, I would separate some of those things, and because ideally your recommendations along the, you know, immediate compliance with the July 1 provisions and the longer term, you know, 2029 housing growth plan, ideally should be on the same continuum. And if you think that there are certain areas where, you know, particularly in the flats, in your business areas, where middle housing probably isn't enough, right? You would like a higher density of housing or a higher density of activity there, you know, then maybe focus on, you know, providing incentives on top of the middle housing. But not worry too much about, you know, trying to hit that, you know, 300 number or whatever. We don't know, we won't know what the number is going to be until this time next year, right? So I think it's okay to take your eye off the ball a little bit on that, other than saying, well, you know, we do want to focus more activity, broadly speaking, in the flats. So, you know, we shouldn't restrict ourselves just to thinking 2 to 9 unit in increments, right? And we should allow for more stuff there. But you know, there's going to be 100 ways to skin this cat in terms of finding, you know, ways to loosen the regulations, you know, throughout town. Accessory apartments and you know 2, 3, 4 unit up residences scattered throughout town, you know, etc. So I would say, you know, give yourselves a break on worrying about the big number that may be coming, for a couple reasons. Number one, we have no idea what it's going to be yet. Number two, that's a 10-year aspiration, not something that needs to go down in black and white as of July. So I would say first things first, but, you know, keep an eye on those areas that could support additional density and look at those as places to incentivize.
Sounds good.
I think we got to look at this as how do you eat elephant, one bite at a time. And first step is we need to know what the current zoning of each of these areas are. We all need to travel to the area and know what it looks like, so when we come back here in 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it is, we talk about each zone, we know what it looks like, and we go, okay, 3 floors? Yeah, I agree with that. Or no, not there. And so I think we all need, I mean, in a perfect world, we'd all get in a 10-passenger van, we drive around and we do this as a meeting. Unfortunately, it'd be a little problem, we'd have to get a bus in case we have public comment with it. I think we're gonna kind of have to independently right now get that zone in each of those areas. We're all gonna have to spend some time on our free time traveling around and actually taking notes and say, yeah, okay, all right, and then come back and then share our thoughts on it. Hopefully, we can have consensus when we go through that and say, no, because we know we've got to become more flexible in those areas. And on top of it, even if we become more flexible, just like the point that you made, there's no guarantee anything's gonna happen with some of these properties, because we don't own them. All we're trying to do is create incentive. Who knows, the people that own the property in Selden, if they see more flexibility, go, wow, we never thought of putting another floor on. Great, thanks so much, we'll do it. So that's my thought, so.
Agreed.
And Tony, did you have a chance to check the calendar?
So Thursday night seemed like a good day to me. It looks like the 23rd is available and the 30th.
That's in the small conference room.
No, looks like it's here.
We can do
have
here?
Availability here.
Does the,
20
everybody agree with the 23rd?
23rd's good for me.
Yep, because if, for some reason, like we finish on the 23rd and we go, oops,
Yeah.
we miss a number of points, we gotta go back, we may be coming back in 2 more weeks
Fair enough.
to do it again, to kind of button down where we're at.
Okay.
So, what do we-
So we have a special meeting.
I may not be able to attend the 23rd.
Okay.
the 23rd?
Yeah, not, and if I'm not here, that's fine. I'll submit my input.
Okay.
Guys,
I can't do the
rock and roll
23rd or
without
the
me.
30th.
Okay.
I'm in Atlanta, but don't
All right.
wait for me.
Are you leaving the 23rd or are you that whole week?
I'm just gonna be away the 22nd through the 25th, and then the 30th we have tickets to the Queen tribute concert.
Well, yeah, that's important.
I mean,
Come on.
it's for Paul's birthday, so.
And Shadi, you're not here on the 23rd?
Yeah, Thursdays are just difficult. My son has lacrosse,
Yeah.
and I try
Okay.
to support every single one of those games.
Yeah.
So
Of course. So as long as everybody else and we have a quorum, we could either do the 30th or the 23rd, whichever.
Okay. But the 30th is, it would be difficult as well because it's a Thursday.
yeah, but I'll provide input.
Should we pick a different
Or
day?
pick a
We
different
could go
day
off
if there's-
Thursday.
I mean,
Don't plan around me.
The last week of April is open, as far as I can tell.
Okay.
Yeah. Looks like maybe Tuesday the 28th is open, Wednesday the 29th.
28th works for me.
The 28th, the preliminary budget hearing now?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, it's not here in this room, so
But
yeah, you're
everyone's
right,
got-
thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, the 28th is the preliminary budget
All right.
hearing, so that won't work. Unless you expect a short meeting, we could start earlier. I don't know.
I don't expect a short meeting.
I don't think so.
The 29th.
29th?
I cannot do.
Listen, don't plan around me. I will
It's
provide my
better
input.
for,
and-
it's better if we all can be here. I mean, this discussion tonight has really been good. I mean, it's,
I agree.
you know, I think we've made some real good progress.
How about the 21st? That's Tuesday.
TPP's meeting, but they're not meeting here.
That's a tough, there's a thing here, and then there's a thing, GPC is meeting. So yeah, our department's commission is here, in this room at 7, so.
Do you need this room?
I guess we don't, but yeah.
But we need them, don't we? Well, if they,
Well, as long as our meeting is open to the public, we do like to be recorded.
oh, so we don't have to be recorded?
Yeah, I mean,
This commission has always been recorded.
it's not a requirement to record any, to be honest,
Are
but,
you recording GATV?
we don't record that.
So then could you go in the small room?
We could go in a small room, yeah. I mean, if that, yeah.
And then, I know you're in that meeting though, so would you have somebody to record you?
Maybe, maybe not, I'm not sure, you know, we might be, because we're doing the TPC, so if it doesn't, I mean, if that's the case, then it won't get it, but, I mean,
You could check.
maybe people like it.
Could you check staffing, could you check for staffing?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
So
of
if
course.
you want, we could double check and
Yeah.
from the 21st.
To Bob's point, early is better just in case we have to
Yeah.
go back and do some stuff again.
So
So
that's
the
what-
21st would be a great date if we can do it.
Yeah.
I think.
And I also think that if we can be recorded, because there's gonna be a lot of interest in terms of our, people are gonna hear what we're recommending, and, because they may have an opinion, we need to hear it, okay? So if there's pushback, you know, we either need to understand that pushback, or we need to explain.
Double-digit views?
What we, and some of it may just like the discussion we're having here, we've all come to certain realities on this stuff, okay? And, you know, part of what we need to do is we're gonna need to educate a lot of people in terms of, look, this is, we need to deal with this stuff.
I will say that if it's the 21st, it might be difficult to record because of those two things. Because we only have a little bit of staff and one person can't really do Tuesdays, so it might be tough to do that. I'll just say. But if that's the only day that works, we'll
Can you,
we'll make it work.
can you
But
set up one static camera where it doesn't,
you can have me do it or something. Yeah.
Okay.
If it's the only day you can do it, we'll figure that out.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I mean,
all right,
that's-
great,
yeah.
okay, appreciate it.
All right, so that's what we'll do, 22nd.
Was it the 22nd?
21st.
21st, excuse me.
Oh, Christmas.
We all show up
Jeremy.
on that.
As well?
There is a TPC meeting as well that night.
I might have to bring a 10-year-old and his
That's
iPad and
over
his earphones, because,
We'll keep them company.
you know,
I don't know.
he won't know
We
the
might need to
difference.
check with them. That might be actually.
We could have him record.
Okay.
Yeah, he probably do a great job.
Which might be actually.
He's saying TPC may be in here, and then his commission meets in the back room.
Yeah.
I'd have to check. I'd have to
Okay.
check with
Okay.
Christine.
I mean, we can always find a place, right? We can. There's got to be more than just this room, right?
And even if it isn't recorded, really, I mean, for the working session, while it has, like you say, historically been recorded, it's gonna be a public
Always
document.
publish minutes.
Right, so the minutes will be there, and we'll have it'll be a public document that, where our recommendations are gonna be.
I don't think we'll finalize things in one meeting, so it's probably not an issue.
So
And-
let me go back, I'm not in tomorrow. I was gonna say, I'll go check, I have to check on Monday,
Okay,
see where TPC is, if they're meeting here.
TPC is here.
definitely, okay,
On the website, yeah. It's good.
It is down there.
okay.
All right, great.
I mean, we can meet it in the center school, right?
What?
Can we meet over in the center school if we need to?
I'd have to check. on that. Or we could meet maybe in the library, I'd have to find another location, make sure it's not
Mhm.
being used. for
Okay.
another-
Okay.
So we'll firm that up on Monday.
Bring
Yep.
it up on Monday, and I'll make sure that they have staff wherever we go to try to record, or a static
A static,
camera is
yeah.
sufficient?
I would say yes.
Yes.
Great, okay. All right, let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question, though, that you talked about looking at the business district? Are you necessarily thinking about looking at, I'm just curious, about the corporate center, the corporate park as well? Or are you
Certainly.
only focusing on, for now?
You mean Dev 2?
I'm sorry?
Dev 2?
Yeah.
I think we have to look at it all.
Dev 2, at least on 2030, was long-term. Dev 1, I mean, but as I recall, on Perry's placemaking survey, Dev 2 was long-term, thinking of the L was near-term. So I'm wondering, should that inform us, the Peary study? Focus now on the L as opposed to Dev 2.
When we looked at that for part of the POCD, the conversation was to keep that business district along those lines, not to include.
I'm just curious.
Dev
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
So we won't review that area?
Well, certainly, we could drive through it, and
I mean,
if you want to have a discussion, we could certainly add it to the discussion. It can't hurt.
Yeah.
But Terry might, across West River there, it was, at least my recollection was, on the Peary plan, it was long-term. Maybe had some connectivity for triking and trails, underneath the West Rock there. But there must have been some reason why the focus was over, towards the Amity Road, BI district,
I mean, we also didn't go all the way up Amity to like the bank. So we were kind of focusing on, what is it, lower business district, I guess they were calling it.
And the other boundary of 2030 was also, it didn't happen up there. John, the other side of West Rock is a ridge, and it's not a protected ridge. It's not a defined ridge under the statutes, but it's still a ridge. but the boundary of the placemaking study stopped at the base of the ridge. It didn't
Right.
try to consider the connectivity of that, which I make no comment, but that was the boundary.
Okay, so prior to, can we get copies of what the zoning requirements are for each of these zones? So when we go out and review, we know what the current rules are, so we know where, okay, that spot there, that's two and a half floors, or this is whatever, so we know. Because I know myself, when I look at it, I'm gonna go, nah, that could be that, no, okay. And, I'm gonna go from the current rules, whether they're too restrictive, not restrictive, whatever happens to be.
Okay. I think that's a fair request.
And I would think a planner like Mike and John probably have a pretty good toolkit to rough in the professionalism of what kind of bulks are the, like, we may be able to say what's appropriate and rely on the planner pretty much for that kind of thing. Like
Right.
saying, this is what, maybe we could say median, maybe we could define it a little bit, but they would actually have better feel for the actual heights and numbers and feet and based upon how we feel about it.
I think when we go through this, I think based on what you sent to us, Cliff, on the reports that you had emailed us after the last meeting, I think there's enough photographs in there of the different business districts. When we have the discussion, I think, without having to go out and take additional pictures, I think there's enough renderings in there to say, okay, this is the corner of Lucy Street, where the dentist used to be on the corner, this is what it looks like, we're suggesting this. I think. I could be wrong on that, but I think there's enough renderings in there for us to reference that report to have a discussion about what we're thinking.
Okay. Very good. Moving on our agenda to item number 4 is the connectivity project update. Had a conversation with Paul DiStefano from SLR about where we are, and they were going to be submitting the plans for that 60% planning stage to the state. They hope to get the state's comments back at the end of April into the beginning of May. The funds that are designated for the planning purposes within that grant must be used by the end of this year, 2026. And they're looking to probably June, July, have another public forum where more information will be provided. Paul recommends end of May, June to reconvene and then hold a special meeting to receive the updates that have been received from the state. To that end, and the comment that you made before about those districts have not been extended beyond a certain area, I was copied on a letter that I will send to everybody, which was from the West River Watershed Coalition Steering Committee, along what you had mentioned with the West Rock Ridge, and they're looking to potentially, with the West River Greenway Trail into the Woodbridge Greenway, in the future, extend sidewalks all the way up Litchfield Turnpike to and even into the back, where we're talking potentially of extending our conversation to the Dev 2 area where the animal control is, district animal control, and then all the way back to the baseball fields and so forth. Also, they consider Canol's Pond, which is along Litchfield Turnpike to North Bradley. They get into how that's specific to a species of wildlife and things like that. All this information was mentioned. It's not going to be anything that's going to be in this 60 or 90%. However, SCROG has a lot of money that's sitting there for different projects such as this and expanding sidewalks and connectivity. So that's something that we can talk about down the road. And then the other question that had been raised was concerning the drainage studies, and they were completed specific to the stormwater. Although the system is somewhat undersized within that area, the cistern operates based on the the level of the river, because the stormwater empties into the river. When they removed the dam, which was behind the Walgreens, it did increase flow and made it a little better. DOT agreed that the system is sufficient, and the additional catch basins may be included in the plans when we're talking about the connectivity project, and anything that is potential further development within that area. So let's say a new development would already require to be drainage systems and storage on site for the stormwater, and then of course residual. But this is what Paul says. So there's the drainage study does not seem to think that additional development in that area is going to be an issue. Moving on, any questions on that? Number 5, Connecticut Main Street update. Nothing really new from the town perspective. However, they are having an event on May 7th from 3 to 6. It's going to be a spotlight on Main for Wallingford. Wallingford has really taken their center of town. They focus on beautification. They've got an organization already in place, the way that Main Street operates, and directs us to, in the future, consider how a Main Street area is going to be governed, and then ultimately beyond the town level, but for the purpose of beautification, making sure that everything is taken care of, the garbage picked up, and how they do it. And they've done that with different types of economic development, and then the Wallingford Center Incorporated. So it's a nonprofit that runs that. So there's more information if anybody's interested in that one. I'll send out this information. This came in today. Any questions? No. Okay. Back on for under the chairman update, on the 26th of February, there was a presentation that everybody should have received the link to, the town attorney, Nick Bamonte, about how to conduct meetings, FOIA, basically when we're holding our meetings and then we're communicating. We're not communicating by replying all in our discussion, so as that could be construed as a meeting. So if you haven't had an opportunity, it was a little long, but I thought it was pretty informative. I know a few of us were there. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, maybe you can.
The moral of the story is don't reply all.
Don't reply all.
Don't reply all. Send it.
Don't use a personal email.
No. Yeah. And I think we're all caught up on the email, Tony, correct? Everybody's got. Okay.
Yeah.
Sean is going to get that done.
Yeah.
Don't
I
feel
missed
bad.
that
It
meeting,
took
but
me a
I
year to
actually,
do it.
I
Took me a
watched
year.
it and then
Do it.
did what I needed to do and communicated with Nick on, and he sent me the package that was he distributed. So it was all good. It was similar to the guy that used to come here, Tom, the guy from the state used to come.
Yeah, and that's
There's
on the
some-
website as well.
Yeah,
The
that's good.
video from him. Okay. Something new, there's not too much information on this just yet. However, in conjunction with Amity Chamber, looking ahead to August, and they are going to be partnering with Xfinity, and they're going to have the Xfinity Community Trailer, which is going to be hosted by Crest in the area of Crest parking lot where that old building was that was kind of all dilapidated, that was removed and paved over. They're going to be holding a community fair, is what they're, the Amity Chamber Fair. The name isn't nailed down yet, but basically Xfinity is going to come in there. They're going to open up the opportunity for organizations within town, as well as folks that are members of the chamber to come in and present whatever it is that they do. So more information to come, but here's something that, is really going to, chamber is running with it. They're going to ask us for our input as we go on. Okay.
Is that date set, Cliff, in August 15th?
It's, yeah, he's got he's got both dates there, 15th and the 16th.
Is there a location?
Right in the.
Crest parking lot.
In the Crest
Oh,
parking
I'm
lot.
sorry.
So because it's there, the amount of input, if you will, so there's no permitting required, the town is going to be there to support them, but we don't have to rely upon too much. We're going to help them by advertising, but beyond that, there's no cost to us.
Do you want me to update on when I went up in February, because we haven't met since then?
Sure.
Partnership ran a meeting on CDFI's, Community Development Financial Institutions. So there was a number of them up there, Capital for Change, Grow America, Hartford Community Loan Fund, Housing Development Fund, Leviticus, and LISC, Local Initiative Support Coalition. Really, there was a roundtable. There are financing sources that might be interesting for us if we sort of see how can we help that area of the village district maybe deploy capital. What these groups do, they generally serve underserved communities, but not all of them is to the same extent. But they try to revitalize communities and where capital is necessary to do that. So, it may be the kinds of things where, they provide capital to get to yes. So if we're talking about, we've got the zoning, now how do we get the money for some of this work? That might be something that we may want to think about. I have all the handouts, but these folks are pretty good about, we could always have, you need financing, the state supports it, there are subsidies, there's home ownership things. Those are the kinds of things that might help with the development in some of those areas that we're trying to develop. So.
Great, thank you. This week's Greater New Haven Chamber Economic Development meeting the guest was the folks from the Green Bank, and they talked about some funding programs that are available for green energy initiatives and so forth. Pretty interesting as well. That information and the PowerPoint supposed to be sent out. I haven't received it just yet. That's held every month on Wednesday morning, Zoom. Everybody should get the email from Ann Benowitz on that. So if you're free for an hour, most of the time there's some pretty interesting information.
I've been getting that.
We'll,
I don't think they've been
Have
getting
you been receiving it?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I've been getting Barry Cohen's, obviously, because I've attended a number of those events.
Huh. I get Ann's stuff.
we'll make sure that you guys get that.
What's Ann's last?
Ann Benowitz.
I could
check.
send her your emails on Monday.
Great. Thank you.
I guess I know we're not a new business yet. Yeah, sorry. We're about to be.
The chamber held Amity Chamber held a St. Patrick's Day business after hours. This was back at the Orange Ale House. Was done in conjunction with Milford Chamber. Had an opportunity to speak with Anne Marie, who's the Economic Development Director of Orange, and a bunch of other people who are, looking for a contact within town to talk about different things. Anne Marie is great. Scott Prudhomme, of course, is on the board of the Amity Chamber, and he had a good relationship with Anne Marie when he was the chair of our commission, and we plan to, in the near future, get together, have a cup of coffee, and talk about where we can maybe collaborate going forward. Also had an opportunity to speak with Randy Frank, who is a consultant hired by the town for the search for the new administrative officer. Before we even got into that, she wanted to know, where the town is EDC-wise, and where the role of administrative officer comes into play with EDC, and overall dynamic of how the commissions are operating. So it was pretty informative for me to have that conversation with her. Any questions?
Cliff, you mentioned an economic development director. I don't know that we've ever discussed that at the EDC. I did hear that at a
In
board of
Orange?
selectmen. No, for Woodbridge, in the budget. So so I went to a, I watch, I'm retired, so like I sit here, like I don't watch TV, I watch YouTube on town meetings, but, so I saw.
Gotta get you a hobby.
I know, but I grew up here. So they got in the budget $50,000 for an economic development. So we have never discussed it here, but I found that I'm not trying to. I think it's more help is better, right? To do good things. But I also felt a little bit like we were hiring somebody to be an economic development director, and we were the economic development commission, and I learned about it somewhere else.
It's not something that I had a conversation.
I'm not saying you.
No,
I'm just saying is I just hope we are having some impact in the town.
I think the conversation's been had here before, numerous times, that the fact is, the majority of us have full-time careers. We can't be out there knocking on doors. And until recently, with Bob's addition and his semi-retirement, yourself being retired, we're not the ones, if you look at these other towns, an example, Anne Marie in Orange, she knows every availability, every vacancy within town. She knows this has this much space, this much. Now, can any of us say that we have that knowledge? I would say absolutely not. There's someone who, this is their role, this is their job to do this. And I think that ultimately, that's what, if it works out, budgeting-wise, that Woodbridge would need. Because you have folks like Tony and Allison and this town staff that just keep getting more and more and more jobs and tasks piled onto them. If there's somebody who is specific to a role like economic development, it can only help us. So I would be all for it.
I will tell you, I worked with Anne Marie, okay, because it was a property that I was dealing with, the company I was with before. She was extremely helpful in terms of giving ideas, and anytime we had someone that was looking at the property, she made herself available. She came with materials. I mean, she talked about why Orange was a good place for people to be. I was like, so I definitely could see some of the positives that came out of that. And, it really kind of ties into what I was going to say later on here in this kind of the updates. I attended a few of the events. Now, I know you went to the Ale House and had beer. Fortunately, when I went to the Charter Oak, they did serve mimosa, so I didn't completely miss out there. Okay, and they actually had Harry and Wheeler, Waylander, and also Maroney was both there giving legislative updates. It's funny because I've attended Chamber of Commerce meetings in Fairfield, and they're much larger, and so it will be nice to see. I was actually encouraging some of the business people that I know, hey, join the Amity Chamber of Commerce so that we get a little more going with what's happening there. One of the things that, and mentioned earlier in the meeting, is when you go to these meetings and people are, who are you, it would be nice to have cards, okay? So that someone can contact you to talk about whatever it is that you want to talk with them about, and eventually, as we develop a brochure and that type of thing. In one of the contexts, I'll just give one of them, there was an event planner there at the one that was at Homewood Suites that I went to. There we got cupcakes. And the woman that was there, I got talking with her, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, wouldn't it be nice if we gave her a tour of all the places in Woodbridge that she could have an event? Okay, because there's a lot of picturesque places in Woodbridge, and wouldn't it be nice to say, hey, let me give you a tour of where all the different places are that she could bring business, to the town, but kind of like a little bit clueless. I mean, I know the town, but those types of things and those connections that happen. I mean, at those meetings, just there's. The one at Charter Oak was very good, and the one at Homewood Suites was good, and met different business people. And obviously over time we want to try to encourage, see if some people would like to open some businesses here in Woodbridge. So.
There was a, maybe it's, oh, it was today. There was a coffee conversation.
Yeah, missed that.
That was
The
that one.
today was macarons. I
Macarons.
missed that one.
But,
And I'm happy to pay for the cards if that's what's needed.
no, so we do have,
Okay.
some generic cards that say Woodbridge Economic Development Commission. There's a box there, feel free to take it,
Okay.
what you want. What I had our secretary do it, who is a, designer as far as this type of goes. She came up with just a label that affixed to the back. She matched the font, she did everything. You
Put her
know,
in
is
contact
it,
with me.
it worked.
Okay.
So we can do that.
Yep.
Based on our budget, that's what we had
Yeah,
available.
I'm happy to pay for it. I really don't issue that
No,
well.
I think that's fair enough. Okay. Moving on to some other new businesses. Of course, we did back in March 5th, we had the ribbon cutting at the Daily Bagel. Was nice. The former Citizens Bank at 194 Amity is now opened. There was a lot of talk back and forth what was going in there, and it's a company is called J. DeMillia and Associates, which they've relocated their office from New Haven. Plan to be in touch with them, and certainly anybody else who has interest in making one of these stops, pop in and introduce yourself as from the EDC. Certainly would be helpful.
What kind of business?
They are consulting as well as they offer real estate management services. A lot of it, I believe, has to do with affordable housing. Dale is aware of this Mr. DeMelia, who was the founder.
How do you spell that?
D'_AMELIA. Dale said they've been around and in that realm of housing for a very long time. And then there was another, I believe this is new, it's called QQ Nail, the nail salon. They've changed hands a number of times. That's in the plaza where the cleaners is along Amity Road at 186 Amity. They've changed names several times.
Like it's right in the plaza?
In the front. So there's Americana Cleaners, there's a barber, there's the
Yeah.
cat
The cat place.
place.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's there.
So they just changed.
Listen, Cece's is always busy, so.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
And then today I have, I'll pass them out to you guys. You guys got one already. I stopped at, I believe you pronounce it, Walls Detailing and Car Wash. It's located at 67 Bradley. I saw them online. They haven't really done too much publicity, but there's some signs out along Litchfield Turnpike. It says Car Wash this way.
Really?
And
Good to know.
so
On this
it's
side.
right over the bridge before you get to the auto body place. It'll be on your left-hand side. And had an opportunity to speak with the gentleman today. He said, if you want to do any type of publicity, grand opening type thing, happy to assist with that. So we're going to circle back next week and see if there's something we can do on that end.
It's smart of them to open that because Splash eliminated interior wash.
Mhm.
So they're basically
Yeah.
trying to fill a market.
And he gives everybody 15% off your first wash with this coupon. So thanks for that. All right. Anything else anybody has?
Can we discuss things to add for next meeting?
Sure.
So tonight we talked
In our
about.
May, for May,
Yes.
or the special meeting?
Yes, not the special meeting, but May one.
May.
So tonight we talked about marketing
Mhm.
and positioning of Woodbridge. Maybe we can set some time aside to kind of start putting some ideas down on how we identify what Woodbridge has to offer and how we can communicate that to
Yay.
the world.
Okay.
I still want to get back to that new business letter,
Mhm.
sending a letter out to new businesses. And at the end of last year, beginning of this year, I can't remember anymore, we put in some goals.
We did.
We should bring those up and go
Bring to
through
the
them.
table.
I like that it kind of ties in with the cards, not only with the networking,
Mm-hmm.
but it'd be nice if I stop into a business, say, hey, hi, by the way, I'm on the Economic Development Commission, I'm Commissioner. Hey, do you have some time next week to chat or whatever? I'd like to stop back and get some perspective, how we can help you. Yeah.
Good point. Let's add another thing to the agenda. Let's talk about inviting some of our local businesses to
Yeah.
this meeting.
Yeah.
Say,
I
come
know
in,
that's been done in the past.
just come in and tell us what you need, or what you think. That's it.
Okay. So that's kind of on the line of retention and outreach that we talked about with Dale. And as I was going through some paperwork, I found an outline that he had provided to us, probably have it or had seen it, can provide that again, where I know that Mika has asked for us to do that outreach, and there's going to be some additional opportunities that the police department is doing, and I wanted to reach out to them and see if we can kind of do it collaboratively. So if they're going to go out and talk to a company, let's say on Bradley Road, well, if they're going to go in and speak to them about their public safety concern, could you go in there as a group and say, hey, here we are, we're from the town, and any kind of concern that you have, anything that outreach that we can assist with. I think that is a way to do it that isn't necessarily, I don't think the word is intrusive, but it's given them a little bit more opportunity to express something well beyond what you're looking at from an economic development standpoint. But all of that stuff, right, if there's a public safety issue, that's all going to filter into your economic development, right? Because if there's an issue that is out there, we should know about it, or at least how we're going to will be addressed. So if it's brought up by someone else when we're speaking with them, we could say, thank you, we're going to pass this on to the police department, or your concern has already been conveyed by somebody else and they're working on it in such and such a manner, or just pass the information along and have a free flow of information going across the boards. And I think that was a great starting point that TPZ and the Board of Selectmen meeting did, was bringing in the list of boards and commissions that you had mentioned, because I think, in my mind, this is the first time in a long time that's happened. And if you're going to attempt to sell these ideas to the town, if you have collaboration and you have input coming from folks in conservation, from economic development, from public safety, it can only bolster the way that you're able to sell the product or the idea, because it's not just one group trying to force something down somebody's throat. So
Who's the, what are you, I'm not quite sure I understand. Sell some, what are we selling?
So when we're talking about the zoning changes, as an example,
To, who are we selling it to?
to the town,
Okay.
the residents of the town, right? It's not just EDC saying, this is what EDC says. In fact, these plans are being designed and discussed within a broad range of boards and commissions within town that obviously hold folks of
Right.
different mindsets.
I'd always tag on to that, and making sure if those commissions don't have representatives from the neighborhood, that we want to make sure that those commissions are adequately represented with members from the neighborhood. Right?
Okay.
Maybe at a I don't know if it's next meeting, but at another point, like, when we talk about marketing, sorry, this is like my lane and where I get excited, like, so, like the branding of Woodbridge, like who we are, the positioning, how we communicate outwardly, but maybe as we're talking about, as we're going to communicate
internally within Woodridge to local businesses, we could have some, like, for lack of a better definition of them, like some speaking points. So not a script, but just so that we're all aligned, and just doing the exercise would help us, like, just be disciplined about what is it that we want to get across, what is the message that we want to leave with these, like, business owners, and that, like, helps us with, like, what is our role, what are we asking for from them, what are we offering to them, what are we hoping for by partnering with the police, maybe, hey, that's helping establish a better relationship with them, and they can, by doing so, they can then further our message. So, you know, I think there's a few pieces. There's the who we are, and then how do we communicate that outwardly, but there's also internally. And I think it's always beneficial to have consistency of message across the group.
Absolutely.
You can be our subcommittee on that.
All
Just
right.
gotta get my email.
There you
Hey,
go. Don't reply all. Next on our agenda is public comment. Public comment. Seeing none, we can move around. Our next meeting is going to be, excuse me, I had the wrong date on here. Besides our special meeting with the date to be confirmed, our next meeting of the Economic Development will be May 14th.
Is this not right?
Is it May 14th?
May 14th,
Yeah.
yep. Okay,
Is that the second Thursday?
that's the second Thursday.
I will not be at that meeting. My daughter's graduating grad school.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
If there's nothing else, we would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second, thank you.
Thank you, John.
John?